we're going over each of the 4 Duskmourn Commander Precons from worst all the way to the best one.
I'm Mia, and I love some juicy reprints.
I'm BZ. I love House. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. That's the best place where you could go to buy Magic the Gathering, singles, accessories, etc. And when you go through our link and check out the cool stuff that we recommend on their website, you support the channel and yourself.
You can even buy those Precons right there. Go check it out. Tell them we sent you. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, lowercase, you can save 5% of your real money tax dollars on your entire order. These are the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
Yes, absolutely.
We're also sponsored by Moxfield, but not right now. We're going to be sponsored by Moxfield later. You're feel free to guess when that's going to be. You will be wrong, but hey, sometimes it's fun to guess, even if you're going to be wrong. And also, we have Patreon, which is a way for you to support us directly and see exclusive content that is not on YouTube. It simply does not exist outside of Patreon. So if you're interested in that, more Nitpicking Nerds, I would head over to Patreon.
There's cool gameplay, there's audits for decks, and there's a bunch of other stuff. Go check it out. But today we have a lot of cool Commander decks to talk about. There are 4 new Precons in Duskmourn, and they have a bunch of mechanics that we haven't seen in Precons in a long time, if ever. We're going to be covering so many things to make sure you have a cohesive idea of what we think of them and how we'd rank them. We're going to be covering Commander, game plan, best reprints, best new cards, budget ads, non-budget ads, and cuts. That is 7 big things.
It's pretty much everything you need to know about these new Commander Precons, and we're going to start out with number 4, the weakest Precon. Mia, what is it?
Endless Punishment at $70. The commander is Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. 2 black-red for a 4/4 with flying, but if with Ward, pay 2 life, because we're stapling Ward onto everything now. Whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a 1/1 counter on him and draw a card. I do like the fact that they are incorporating drawing a card into their Rakdos commanders now, because that's not really often seen. However, this deck is both one of the most expensive of this, and also it's just not there in terms of quality.
Yeah, it's really pricey coming in at $70. And this is a group slug deck, so we're looking to use cards and resources that deal damage or make our opponents lose life to get value out of it. But there's really not much in the way of actually paying off doing that for this deck. So it's a bunch of cards sort of randomly tied together by Valgavoth, and if Valgavoth dies, you have like very few ways to pay off this thing that you keep doing, which is dealing damage to opponents. So it doesn't get there on power. We'll check about reprints though. By best reprints, we have Cataract Parasite, $13.50. This is a really good way to deal damage to opponents. It's literally as cheap as possible. It's 1 mana. You're gonna have a red permanent, so dinging them when they draw cards, totally valid. It's probably one of the better group sluggy type cards to put in.
Honestly, when I first saw this, I was super confused to say like why it was so expensive, so I'm very happy to see this here. We also have Rampaging Ferocidon at $12. This says players can't get any life, and when creatures enter the battlefield, it dings their controller by 1. I think this is great for this deck, especially if you're playing against like token metas.
Didn't know this card was $12, but it is going to keep people in check. I think you'll see that this deck has the ways to deal damage. That foundation has already been set very well. But like, I really expected the new cards, which we will get to care about this at all. Next reprint is Vile Smasher the Fierce at $10. Just a fine card. It's a fine alternate commander. If you want to put it somewhere else, you can. It's got partner. It's totally good in this deck, though. That brings us to $35 for the 3 best reprints. You'll see similar reprint levels in future decks that are less expensive. So this value to me is not here almost at all. A little unfortunate there. Let's go to the best new cards. We're going to start with the Lord of Pain, 3 black-red for a 5/5 menace. Your opponents can't gain life, and whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player, and he deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. So if Mia casts a 5-drop, then Lord of the Pain is going to deal 5 to one of the other 2 players at the table. I mean, I guess I could have it deal damage to me, but I probably won't do that.
I don't think that's the greatest idea to deal damage to yourself, but I think that overall this does fit in theme. But I do, if the rest of the cards are like this, I do get what you're saying, where there's like the way to do the thing, but there's no payoff. Because I always hate when commander decks like never have a backup plan built in. I feel like a lot of precons often fall into this trap of like, yeah, if you don't have your commander out, you're kind of not going to get where you need to go. But this deck just kind of emphasizes that totally.
Yeah, this card is a really good way to deal damage, throw damage around. I understand that dealing damage in and of itself is kind of a way to win the game, but I think with some of the give and take you have with these damage dealers, because some of them are like, well, when they draw cards, and some of them are like, well, when they play creatures, and some of them are like, you have to put in resources to do this. I really just want some payoffs for that. I really just need a few more ways to tie it together so the deck doesn't just feel like a bunch of random cards that say deal 1 damage on it. Next up, we have Gleeful Arsonist. 2 and a red, 1/2. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, it deals damage equal to its power to that player, and it is undying. This card's pretty cool. It's definitely like a Punisher type. As it stands, the card's not great. So if you can sacrifice it, kill it, make it die, it doubles in strength. But really, I think you want to throw an equipment on this. You know, if you throw like Colossus Hammer or something, or put like 5 counters on this, that's going to be real tough to beat it.
Honestly, I'm pretty excited about this. This is like kind of a mini gutter snipe type deal, but it also hits just all non-creature spells, so like the artifacts and the planeswalkers and stuff too. I think this has more homes than we really think about it in here, especially if you have like, maybe if you have some sort of like counters you can put on it, like in sort of like teamer deck, for instance. I think this could make it work.
It definitely got homes outside. It's not just a group slug card. Next up, though, Steep Drop Off into Persistent Constrictor. 4 and a black, 5/3. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they lose 1 life, and you put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature they control. I do like that when you play it, you sort of get something right away. As the turns pass, before you untap, you get 3 triggers of it. This seems like one of those cards that, boy, I sure would like to have another card besides Valvagoth, that says when they lose life, I get something out of it. That would make this card a lot better, but I don't know. I feel like it's not enough. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this card will be kind of cool, but 5 mana seems like a lot for 3 negative counters a turn.
I don't know, man. We just have better rates for things. Like if you want -1/-1 counters, we have things like Yawgmoth. If we want things to lose 1 life, we have things that like can draw you we have things that when opponents draw cards, they can lose life, and that's just better overall in black-red. I don't know. I think that overall, this is a little too slow for the game plan.
Let's go on to our budget ads. There's some really good budget ads for this deck, actually. Starting with Ob Nixilis, Captive Kingpin. Whenever your opponents take 1 damage or lose 1 life, you get to basically draw a card. You get an impulse draw. This is like more of the stuff that I wanted in the deck, so I'm obviously going to try to add as much as I can.
Rakdos is just so hard to get cards sometimes, so this is a great way to be able to do that. I think this is a very cool add to this. We also have Rug of Smothering. Whenever players cast spells, they take 1 damage, and then if they cast 2 spells, they take 2 damage, and so on and so forth. So if they're chaining baubles like Beezy, they're going to be taking a lot per turn.
This is the Beezy killer. I've never seen this card be bad, really. The only time it's bad is if you're at a low life total, in which case just don't play it, don't cast it, leave it in your hand. But this is just, it racks up serious damage. And with Valgavoth, the great thing is they cannot possibly do anything about Rug of Smothering until they cast a spell, which means they're going to lose 1 life, and then Valgavoth is going to trigger.
I am not afraid to say that I have died to Rug of Smothering in multiple games before.
It'll just get you. Same with Painful Quandary. Every time you cast a spell, you got to lose 5 or discard a card. Definitely puts the chokehold on the game a little bit. It's not the best card in the world because it is 5 mana, but if it sticks around, you're in business.
This is one of my friend's favorite cards, and no one wants to kill it because there's someone else always hurting more because of it. But in the process, you're still losing life or you're still discarding cards, and it's never what you want to be doing.
Yeah, this is a card that if it dies immediately, I feel terrible for casting it. But if it sticks around for like 2 turns and someone leaves it alive, then I feel really good about it. Next up is Great Unclean One. It makes everybody lose life on your turn, and then if you have the most life, you get a bunch of like little 1/3 dudes. I like the fact that it gives you that right away. Presumably, we're going to be at the most life because we are group slugging people.
I mean, we just need payoffs in this deck. That's what we were talking about. We have the ways to get people to lose life, but we don't have the ways to actually go, okay, now what?
Right. I mean, damage doublers would also be viable. There's a few of those. Also, I like Sunspine Links. It just kind of dings everybody for a bunch of damage, and it says players can't gain life, which is like crucial to the group slug plan. You want probably 3 or 4 or 5 cards that say that in the deck just to make sure there's no, sneaky folks trying to go up to 50 life.
I mean, Sunspine Links just in general, I think will deal so much damage because if you're playing against people who are even 2 colors, much less 3, 4, and 5, they're going to be hurt for so much, especially if it's later in the game.
I mean, I'm super greedy. If I'm playing a 2-color deck, I have like 12 MDFCs. I'm probably playing like 6 basic lands. I'm just going to get dinged for
Basically, this deck, if you upgrade it like this, is going to kill Beezy. He's going to be playing like 2 baubles, and he'll have his Field of the Dead mana base and his monocolor $50 deck, and he'll just die instantly.
You just play Rug of Smothering and Sunspine Links, and it's over for me, quite frankly. Let's go to some non-budget ads if you want to add a little bit more spice. We got Forsaken Waste. This is a random card from forever ago that's recently spiked because of this deck. Each person loses a life, basically, during their upkeep. So it's a nice way to trigger Valgavoth over and over.
Yeah, I think it's one of the, I'm not going to say auto includes in this deck, but I think it's one of the first things that people thought of. Next is Blood Chief Ascension. It comes down really cheaply, and if your opponents lose 2 or more life in a turn, you put a quest counter on it, and when it has 3 or more quest counters on it, whenever cards are put into the graveyard, you can gain 2 life, and they can lose 2 life.
Yeah, here's another payoff. Here's a payoff that we want, and probably another reason why this is so expensive is because these are really hard to come by. We're happy to, once this goes off, every time we do anything, they are just getting zapped, and it does pay us off for actually making them lose life in the first place. Agate Instigator, kind of a pricey one from Bloomborough it ended up being, but this is a good way to make sure that you have consistent damage. You play it, you offspring it, and now you've got 2 little tiny threats that are just going to keep ding, ding, chipping away.
I'm happy we bought a bunch of these because this card is so good. I've been playing it in Perforos lately. It has been a house.
I mean, Impact Tremors on a stick with another stick next to it. We were going to buy a bunch of those anyway. Maddening Hex, when they cast non-creatures, you roll a d6 and it hits them for that, and then it transfers to another opponent. This is a fun one. I think this is a very group slug type card where you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not good for you.
I mean, I love the chaos of this. The group slug thrives on chaos, and rolling a dice and going, I don't know, not my problem anymore, is so group slug and chaosy.
It's pretty classic. And then, of course, Shield Dread the Apocalypse. You know, you got to save one absolute, banger that's just kind of a good card, but it is so perfect for Group Slug. I mean, you're going to be gaining life. You're going to be going up, making sure your great unclean ones are triggering to make your little 1/3 Nurgle guys, and they're going to be going down so fast. Shieldred just kills people.
Hey, Shieldred, I love you in my Group Slug / card draw deck, but please go down in price. You're so expensive right now.
All right, so there is a theme on the cards that we cut from this deck. There's a fine line between, like, chaosy Group Slug and Group Hug. I would prefer to just play no Group Hug cards. That's kind of our thing. We love cutting those. So I cut Stormfist Crusader. It makes everybody draw a card on your upkeep, which isn't really good for triggering Valgavoth. It's really not good for triggering him because their opponents have to lose life during their turns. So this feels like it's giving them extra cards, extra resources to get themselves out of the hole that we're digging for them, and I really don't want to do that. We also have Barb Flare Gremlin. This is a new card. It's like lands make extra mana, and then they ding you. I really don't want to give my opponents any extra resources. I just don't think it's worth having this. Go throw in a Mana Barbs or the other one, Burning Earth, instead of giving them extra lands and pinging them.
I feel like when you go Group Slug, you have to kind of position yourself as the villain, right? It's like Poison, right? You're like, I know that all of you guys are going to get kind of hurt. I am the villain here, like Nikocado. And it's kind of like, you have to kind of own that. So I don't really think that we should be throwing in things to help our opponents if we are going to be the villain and trying to, like, hit everyone. Another card like that is Spiteful Visions. I don't want everyone to draw extra cards, even if they are taking damage for it, to draw removal to get out of my game plan that I'm trying to hit them with.
Yeah, you're gonna be the villain. That's just gonna be the case. And when you go, all right, guys, screw you. Here's 85 ways to deal damage to you on the board. All right, here's 2 extra cards. Like, where do you think those cards are going to go? They're going to go after all your really annoying creatures. I think it's not a great move. It's fine to ping them for damage, like with Cataract Parasite and Shieldred, but I don't want to give them extra cards unless it's some sort of, like, modal finisher, right? If I have the option to at some point make everybody draw 7, fine, I can do that. But I don't want to play Wheel of Fortune in this deck necessarily unless I'm specifically focusing on the card draw thing. But this is more of a general Group Slug.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can politic your way out of Group Slug. So yeah. I don't really think that giving your opponent stuff is a great way to try and, like, soften the blow. Your blows aren't going to get softened. Just lean into it.
Right, and this specific deck doesn't have enough of the Wheel of Fortune Nekusar type deck for me to keep Spiteful Visions in it. We also have just some cards that honestly are bad, and they are new cards, and they are the cards that should have been a payoff in some way for making our opponents lose life. We have Suspended Sentence, which is just like 3 and a black, destroy a creature, and then it exiles stuff with 3 time counters and it gains Suspend. This just seems... I am never going to look at this card for the rest of my life, I feel like.
No, absolutely not. We could destroy things for way cheaper. The instant speed, it's like whatever. And then, yeah, if I'm paying 4 mana, it better bare minimum exile. And not just exile itself with 3 time counters. I mean exile the creature.
That's not what I meant. Also, Seance Board, it gets counters if creatures die. This is a flavor home run, but it's just not for this deck. It's a cool new card that they probably had to put in this deck, but you should just take it out and put it in like your Spellslinger decks or maybe Spirit or Demon decks, because then it'll start to add a pretty cool amount of mana. I just don't think this deck is like all in on instant sorceries or demons, and it's really not even all in on like killing creatures every turn to get the Morbid trigger to get the extra counters. So Seance board, get out of here. But that's going to bring us to our number 3 deck, which is
Miracle Worker. This is on Card Kingdom at $45. The commander is Aminatu, Veil Piercer. We haven't seen her in a while. 1 white, blue, black for a 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 2. Each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 4. This has some really juicy reprints in it, and we haven't seen Miracle in a long time.
It's interesting because I thought that this was going to be a deck that was printing more Miracle cards. There was a couple, but it's actually mostly an enchantment deck that gives the enchantments Miracle with Aminatu. There's not really a ton of Miracle stuff going on other than her, so it's kind of like an enchantment deck. So you're going to try to be drawing cards, preferably at instant speed, to cheat out a lot of mana on each enchantment that you draw. The one thing that's a little weird about this mechanic, the Miracle, like the rules of it, is if I cast like Brainstorm, draw 3 cards on somebody else's turn, and the first one I draw is a Miracle, I have to reveal it as I draw it during the Brainstorm.
Ooh.
And you have to make sure that you go, oh, reveal this, it's a Miracle, draw the second card, then put 2 back on top. Then the Miracle will actually go off. It's a little weird, but that's the only thing you need to know in terms of like weird rule stuff. We're going to get into some of the best reprints in this deck. We always talk about the best 3 reprints in each deck. First one is Extravagant Replication, $14. This card went up, I think, because of the Upkeeps deck.
Oh, really? That's crazy. But the next one is Inkshield at $12. This has had a reprinting in a secret lair, but no meaningful ones kind of like this. And people seem to love it for blowouts in combat.
Yeah, we also have Ondu's Spirit Dancer, $9.50. I love seeing this card. It's one of the ones that I'm worried about being $30 a year from now, so I'm glad it's getting reprinted, so that's not really going to happen. This is a great enchantment payoff. Those 3 total up to $35.50, and the Precon itself was $45, so the 3 top value cards, at least at the time of recording this, being $35, that's pretty solid.
I think that's a very good portion of what you're going to be spending anyways, and there's going to be 96 other cards in there which are going to be worth the money, so
exactly.
I don't feel bad about that value. But let's talk about the best new cards. We usually talk about the best 3. The first one being Soaring Lightbringer, 4 and a white for a 4/5 flying enchantment creature. Other enchantment creatures you control have flying. Whenever you attack a player, create a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment creature token that's tapped and attacking the player. I think this is super cool. I mean, we love our Combat Calligrapher.
We do.
We love those type of effects. It's just a lot of value, even though it's only you in this case, so other opponents won't be getting the value of getting those guys and being able to deal out more damage to your opponents. This is still free value.
Yeah, sometimes the Combat Calligrapher Inklings come back to haunt you in a way. This is only upside. I mean, it also has an immediate impact, which is kind of what I'm hoping for on a 5-drop. I have to invest all this stuff. I'd really rather get something right now. We're very spoiled on this channel. So being able to play this, attack with 3 things, get 3 things, and trigger your ETBs or what have you, because they are enchantments, so that does trigger Constellation or just your Welcoming Vampires, Mentor the Meeks you have laying around. That's a lot of stuff that's happening all at once. And the fact that they have flying means they're going to probably survive. We also have Redress Fate, 6 white for a sorcery. This does have Miracle for 3 and white, and it returns all artifact and enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a Miracle card, but also just an artifact card and also an enchantment card, and it goes in a bunch of different decks. This seems like a pretty sweet one. It's a little hard to set up if you're not a Miracle deck, but I still think it's a good card.
You'll definitely need a lot of top deck manipulation, but this can have an incredibly big payoff because 4 mana just to be able to do all that. I mean, we're paying bigger premiums than that usually.
I mean, even 8 mana, it's fine. It's okay to have to spend 8 mana to get 35 mana value worth of stuff in play, so we'll take it. We also have Secret Arcade / Dusty Parlor, which is a room. Secret Arcade is 4 and a white for an enchantment. On non-land permanents and permanent spells you control are enchantments in addition to their other types. And Dusty Parlor is 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that spell's mana value on up to 1 target creature. So the way rooms work, if you don't know, is you start with one of the 2 rooms. You cast either side for 2 and a white or 4 and a white. Then you only get that side, and you can pay the mana value of the other side to unlock it and then get both sides. So what you'll eventually get for 8 mana is all your stuff is enchantments, and whenever you cast any spell, really, you can put counters equal to that spell's mana value on a creature you control.
Do you have to wait, or can you do it in the same turn?
You can just go 4 and a white for Secret Arcade, pay 2 and a white right after to unlock Dusty Parlor.
That's good to know, because I know they've been messing around with things like plot or like, having spells plot like with Aven Interrupter where it has to be waiting. So that is good that you can do all this all at once.
But we're going to move on to our budget ads. Now, one thing that this deck was kind of lacking in that I think you should know about if you're going to upgrade this deck is it really doesn't have that many ways to draw a card at instant speed. And the first thing I think of when I read Abenatu is I want to miracle something every single turn if possible. And since all she's checking for is enchantments, it means whenever you draw an enchantment on any turn, you get to cast it for like a huge reduction. It's going to be easy to have that mana up. So I want instant speed ways to draw cards when I'm upgrading this deck. First one I'm thinking of is Greed. This lets you draw a card each turn just for a single black. So anytime you activate it once and you draw an enchantment and you've got some mana left, boom, cast it for a reduction.
I feel like a lot of the precons kind of lack in card draw to begin with, but I feel like it's just a miss overall when the entire point of this is to draw cards at like the first card each turn to have a cost reduction is missing card draw. I feel like that's half the strategy just wiped out.
It's missing the instant speed. There's a couple, but there's not as many as I would put, certainly. So Greed's a great one because it is an enchantment, so you can miracle it, and it easily triggers your miracles for the whole game, really. We also have Omen of the Sea. I just like this card. It's an enchantment, and it draws a card at instant speed. Plus, if you really have nothing better to do later, you can scry 2, which sets up a future miracle. So I think these are both bangers for the deck.
This does have Flash, which means if you do need to draw the cards at instant speed, that's great. But just in general, miracles do cheat timing, which is pretty amazing because most enchantments can't be cast at instant speed like this one.
Right, that's the other thing to know about miracles. I guess this deck's just super confusing because I can cast Greed on someone else's turn if I miracle it. Miracling does cheat timing restrictions of all that stuff. So Omen of the Sea is great because it can trigger this miracle on other people's turns, and then whatever the enchantment is, even if it doesn't have Flash, you can still cast it. Next up, we have Trade Routes. This can let you discard a land to draw a card. This is the 2 boxes I'm continuously trying to check with this deck because it was lacking this stuff. I want enchantments that draw cards and instant speed. That's what the deck needs.
If that's what the deck needs, then it feels weird that it's lacking so much of this. But if you like enchantments and you like Pegasuses, how about Archon of Sun's Grace? Because we're going to make so many 2/2 Pegasi that we're going to be swinging in with people's faces because enchantments kind of hard to throw up beats.
Oh yeah, we're swinging in with people's faces. We have instant speed enchantments, all these little things. We're cheating out mana costs when we play like Greed on someone else's turn for a single mana, and then activate Greed and play Trade Routes on someone else's turn, and then activate Trade Routes and play I don't know, whatever enchantment on someone else's turn. Now, every time we do all that shenanigans, we're getting 2/2s out of it, and then we can overwhelm people. I also have Cacophony Unleashed. This is just a board wipe. We're blowing up non-enchantment creatures at instant speed with this now because we're going to try to miracle it.
I mean, it's just perfect for this deck. But if you want to spend a little bit more money, how about non-budget ads? We have 5 of those for you. One of them is Mystic Remora. Do you like drawing cards?
I mean, this is already a staple. You're going to be playing this in any blue deck regardless, and it's got the bonus of being an enchantment, and it's got the bonus of drawing cards on other people's turns. There's really no reason that this isn't like one of the best cards in the entire universe for this deck. We also have Limdul's Vault. You can painstakingly and very slowly but surely set up the top card of your library to be an amazing enchantment, whatever you need at the moment, then draw a card because this card itself does not draw, which is very useful for you. So then boom, flash it in, surprise somebody, get the blowouts.
But if you want something a little bit less painstaking, why not just Enlighten Tutor and just slap your best enchantment right on top?
Yeah, fine, whatever it is, no frills, and then surprise people. Enlighten Tutor has never looked this appealing for a deck. We also have Trouble in Pairs. It's a busted enchantment. It's really, really good. Draws you many, many cards over the course of the game. And hey, some of those cards, need I remind you, are going to be the first card you drew in a given turn.
Trouble in Pairs has been a house. Like, we haven't been able to talk about it that much on the channel. It's been so good, though.
Yeah, it's just like every time your opponent blinks or moves, you draw a card. That's basically what happens. And I wanted to throw in a little bit of spice, a little bit of extra pepper on the wallet. Treachery is also a card I'd recommend because we can steal opposing stuff, and then since we're casting it for a reduction, hopefully when we miracle it, now we're up 3 mana, and that lets us do future miracles. So, I mean, Treachery, kind of a busted card already, but again, we are going to take it, and we're going to make it even more busted.
I have played against this card so much in his Enchantress
Pretty
deck.
fun, right?
It's so annoying. It's so good. Get it if you want to make your deck, like, very souped up.
Yeah, because you always think,
so
oh
good.
man, that's so annoying. They're going to steal my best creature. And then I'm like, trigger, untap 5 lands. You're
Yeah.
just like, what?
Yeah, how about steal it for free, Enchantress trigger, draw a card, draw 2 cards? It's like, okay, that's cool. That's
Please
cool.
stop. Please stop. All right, but this is a Commander Precon, which means we do have to cut some cards. There's always a few like head scratchers in here. Like we're going to cut Prognostic Sphinx. I understand that it can scry, but it's a 5 mana creature that does not hit hard at all. And I really, 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 really don't want to use this to scry.
I don't want to put Burnished Heart in my deck either. I feel like we are past the point of ramping with Burnished Heart, even in non-green decks.
It's also just not an enchantment. Maybe if it was an enchantment, I would see it. But like, it's just a random artifact just kind of hanging out in here. He's not invited to the party. Cramped Vents and Access Maze is another room. I don't think this room really goes with what we're doing. I know some precons like to put, seeded cards for different archetypes. There are alternate commanders in every precon. So this is probably some of that. I'm not interested. Monologue Tax, this card just sucks. I think Monologue Tax ended up not being very good at all. So I'm going to cut it just from a power standpoint.
I feel like that too. I never see Monologue Tax around, and when it was released, everyone was very hyped for it. So I'm very surprised to see it reprinted here.
Did not live up to that hype. And also, I love this card so much. But Dream Eater, it's a bit expensive. All we're doing is getting a Surveil 4 and a bounce. And I guess that's supposed to set up a miracle, but like if some of the cards you're adding in are Greed or Enlightened Tutor, there's no room for Dream Eater as much as I love the card. But we do have to get onto our next deck. Mia, what is that?
Boo.
Ah!
This is Jump Scare at $40. The commander is our favorite child genius, Zamon, Mystery Unraveler. 2 blue-green for a 3/3. Whenever a land you control enters, manifest Dread if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. Otherwise, take a permanent you control and turn it face up. I feel like this is different than the usual type of Simic landfall value type, and this is different than normal manifest too, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, we have another new mechanic. Manifest Dread is look at the top 2, manifest one of them as a 2/2, the other one goes in your graveyard. So we have a little selection, and this deck is primarily not what I expected. I thought it was going to be a morph deck, but it's actually more of a landfall deck that has a bunch of gigantic monsters in it, so that when you manifest Dread, you have a good shot of looking at one of them, put that face down, then just bin the other card. That's great. Then the next time you play a land, whatever monster it is, you basically just got it for free.
I'm pretty excited about this one. I have an Uro deck, and I feel like it's going to have some cards from this deck that I need to slot into that one. This seems juicy.
Well, juice hasn't even begun yet because, oh my god, the reprints in this are off the charts. The best reprints from this, the first one is AC. They reprinted AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait, which at the time of reprinting was a $38 card. Now, you can either count this as a $38 card because that's what it was when it was reprinted, or you can use its price that I found now on Card Kingdom, which is $30. We'll show you the price of either one. We also have a Shaya, Soul of the World, which I didn't realize is $19 at the moment, but it also supercharges this deck because now every creature you have enter triggers landfall to turn more things face up.
And the next one is World Spine Worm at $7.50. This is a 15/15, and you were not wrong about putting gigantic monsters in here.
Right, but those 3 reprints alone, that's 3 reprints. And mind you, this deck was $40. Those 3 reprints are either $64.50 if you count the original AC price, or $56.50 if you count the new price. So you could sell 3 cards for less than they're worth, pay back the whole precon, and then just keep the rest of the deck?
I mean, that's just value. That's just stonks right here. Put the stonks meme.
The stonks meme. Put the stonks meme, Chris. We got to give it to the best new cards in addition to those hot fire reprints. We got Shriekwind Devourer, 5 green for a 7/5 trample. Whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures, untap up to X lands, where X is the greatest power among those creatures. This is similar to that white creature where it's just whenever you attack. So as soon as you attack, you get the trigger. It works right away. And then you basically just untap all your lands.
I need this. I need this for my Uro deck. You need this for your Svella deck. This is just a juicy, good card. And 7 mana in a green type, I mean, that's easy to get. We could get this pretty quickly.
It's easy to stomach when I get refunded for almost all of it or all of it right away. That's pretty doable. Next up, Zamon's Hypothesis, 3 blue for an instant. You may put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. Then choose odd or even. Return each creature with power of the chosen quality to its owner's hand, and 0 is even. So you can return everything that's 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, or 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc.
I like this because it gives you the choice to like mess around with a creature's power first before bouncing everything, I really like having that just a little bit of ability. I'd say that if that before that 5 mana would be a little overcosted for this, but I think this could make it playable.
Yeah, I mean, the cards in this precon, the new cards, they're not busted or anything. You know, there's a steep drop off after Shriekwind Devour, but I still think this is an interesting card, and it's cool that you can, with one counter, guaranteed, you know, save something or, you know, doom something to be bounced. The next one, I don't know how to feel about this card, but I'm going to read it. It's Disorienting Choice, 3 and a green for a sorcery. For each opponent, choose up to one target artifact or enchantment that player controls. For each permanent chosen this way, its controller may exile it. Then, if one or more of the chosen permanents are still on the battlefield, you search your library for that many land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is the wordiest card ever. All it says is you can choose 3 things, and your opponents can decide whether to exile them or give you your best land. It's tough because I really want my best lands, and I also want to exile my opponent's best things, but giving them the choice might make this a little stinky. If you're in an emergency, this isn't removal.
I mean, it is disorienting and it is multiple choices, but unfortunately, I don't love this because I don't like giving my opponents choices, and I feel like for 4 mana, even though this does exile it in green, I could still be playing like Pier's Whim and then be getting a land of my own, like guaranteed at that point. But it doesn't cheat anything with timing because this is still a sorcery.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how I really feel about this, but only time will tell.
Yeah, I am interested to try it. I'll definitely give it a shot. Now we're going to go to some budget ads. Now, Mia, you mentioned that you wanted this for your Uro deck. Why not just put Uro in this deck? It's actually sweet.
I mean,
because
it's so good.
You're going to manifest Uro from the top of your library, put him in, and then when you landfall again, Uro just flips up and he's already on the battlefield. When you turn a permanent face up, it does not enter the battlefield. It's already been there. Then you can just attack freely with Uro.
I mean, at this point, they're just making like precons that will like interact from different sets because Uro was just recently
Land precon.
If you got that land precon and then got this one and just mashed them together, I think that could work really well.
Yeah, the other thing about Uro that's even nicer is that he himself helps you. You can attack with Uro and another face-down creature, and if you've already played a land this turn, you can draw and then put another land out, which turns that attacking face-down creature face up, and it's like, surprise, World Spine Worm coming in hot. I paid 0 for this.
I mean, Uro's such a good card, and I'm so happy to be able to see it in the budget ads portion of this video. It was so expensive for a while.
Yeah, there's also Vanifar Evolved Enigma. She helps you get face-down permanents in play, or if you've got enough of those and you can't flip them, or before you flip them, you can put counters on them.
Next one is Harrow, because we're going to want to get our best land anyways, so let's get it out really, really early and sacrifice something in the meanwhile.
The key is that this is an instant, and it puts 2 lands onto the battlefield, because Zimone only gives us the Manifest Dread once per turn, so we can pass, wait till someone else's turn, and then go Harrow, trigger, Manifest Dread, and then also, at the same time, flip that thing right over, and now we're going to untap with it on our turn to beat face.
I'm pretty excited to see how Manifest Dread plays out. I mean, not only is it in this precon, but it's just a running mechanic throughout the set, so I think it could be pretty good.
Yeah, we also have Secret Plans, just a nice way to buff your... Yeah, you don't have to put morphs in here, but as you do the Zimone thing, you're going to be getting advantage, and it's totally fine. I was surprised it wasn't in the deck, honestly. And then also Ugid's Mastery, it's a good way to get more... manifests, more colorless face-down things into play, and it's actually really easy to attack with 6 power or more of creatures because all of our things are gigantic.
I mean, you're going to be cheating them out with the manifests anyways, or just 3 morphs is 6 power. But moving on to non-budget ads, the first one is Kozilek, the Broken Reality. This was in MH3, and I'm surprised to see it's fallen this far, but it's going to boost all of your morphs and manifest power because they're all colorless creatures.
Yeah, it's not very pricey, but it's amazing in this deck. It just kind of does everything we want. It gives us those bodies, and if we have a lot of them, we don't have to turn them face up. We can just beat in with our 5/4s that are manifested. We also have Omniscience, can be great in this deck. It just casts all your stuff for free, and Zimone notably just doesn't say that the permanent has to be a creature. You can turn any permanent face up. So you can Manifest Dread Omniscience, turn it face up, and then I don't see how you could possibly lose because the rest of your deck is full of things like Kozilek. And the next one, Nyx Bloom Ancient, which is actually more of a second copy of Omniscience, honestly.
I mean, it's so juicy, and I feel like this deck is going to get pretty mana hungry. I mean, you're going to be getting landfall triggers a ton, but it never hurts to have more mana, and Nyx Bloom Ancient will really help with that.
Yeah, it's just some of the best things to possibly cheat in this format. Also, if we're talking about the lower end of the curve, Guardian Project. When you manifest Dread, you get a creature with no name. And funnily enough, that triggers Guardian Project. So no matter how many creatures you have with no name, you are still going to be drawing a card whenever those manifest Dreads enter.
I love that. I didn't actually know that's how the interaction works, but Guardian Project is such a good card. I run it in Elves. You can run it basically anywhere where you're slapping down a ton of creatures.
Yeah, and then let's also help Zimone out. Let's do Dryad of the Elysian Grove. It gives us an extra land drop. It mana fixes us, which is not a huge problem because we're only 2 colors. But yeah, we're going to mana fix, and we're going to get 2 landfall triggers so that we can go land, manifest, flip it, pass, and then Harrow on the end step. But some of these cards are going to have to make room, and they don't live up to that hype. Greater Tanuki, I understand that this does put a land in play at instant speed, but like this is the first thing you just want to upgrade. You throw in Harrow, throw in everything else, Roiling Regrowth, the Ents card, there's like an Entish Restoration, there's infinite.
I feel like Greater Tanuki always sneaks its way into decks, and I'm like, I don't think this should be here.
Yeah,
it's
like,
just too expensive for me.
What are you doing here, buddy? Sandworm Convergence, it's a big permanent to flip face up, but when you're upgrading this deck, that's the first thing you cut because you're going to be adding some of the best cards ever that we mentioned, like Omniscience. What do I make room for? Well, Sandworm Convergence. Would you rather cast all your spells for free or get 1/5/5 every turn?
Sandworm Convergence is one of those cards where I understand why it's in a precon, but also it's not the power level where I want it to sit at later.
Totally, yeah. Maybe it's fine for the precon, but when you try to upgrade, that's when you get it out of there. Giggling Skitter Spike, just kind of a random card. I don't think it really belongs in this deck. It belongs somewhere else. Scab Ruinator. I get that when you flip it up, you don't have to pay the exorbitant casting cost of this thing, but it's just a 5/6 flyer. It doesn't do anything.
I mean, just because you're cheating mana doesn't make something good. I feel like that's kind of missed sometimes.
And Eudora Grave Gardener. This could potentially be like a combo card if you want to add some of the other, I think Proteus Machine can go in and like sack outlets. But when I can't control when my creatures die, I don't want stuff that has dice triggers. Like it's just a weird pseudo board wipe protection. It's very fair. It's very face up. It's very honest. It's not tricky at all. Your opponents know exactly what's happening. And I'm kind of off of this thing.
I'd agree. I think this is not where we want to be with the deck.
But I want to be into our next deck, which is...
Surprise Moxfield ad! Moxfield is the best place to look at all of the decks online, including these precons right here. They actually post them as soon as possible so you can see the unaltered list in their printings.
That's the best way to know that you have the most up-to-date, like the actual precon list. You can't trust anybody else. I trust the Wizards of the Coast account made by the guys at Moxfield, and I trust Moxfield with my life, actually, because this deck building website is too good. It needs to be nerfed, but I think it will only be buffed in the future.
Moxfield, we love you. And our number 1 deck is Death Toll at $40. The commander is Winter, Cynical Opportunist. 2 black-green for a 2/5 with Death Touch. Whenever Winter attacks, you mill 3. At the beginning of your end step, you can exile any number of cards from your graveyard, with 4 or more types among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. I think this is the best deck by far out of all of them. It is a super cool commander. It is just packed with so many good cards. And I just really think that the fact that it says permanent and not just creature opens this to a wide opportunity of just stuff you can put out.
This is a Delirium deck. You're looking to fill the graveyard, get a lot of different card types in there, either through sacrificing or playing sorceries, instants, milling, whatever. Then once you do that, you find a permanent, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, creature, whatever. Bring it back as long as you can exile like one chunk of Delirium. This just looks solid. We're going to get into these reprints here. This is, easily the best deck we mentioned. This is $40. Best reprints we'll talk about. Professor Onyx, $13. The Planeswalker, I don't know if it has the most synergy, but that's great. Take your non-synergy card that's worth $13, take it out of the precon, go sell it for $10, and then wash your hands of it and just feel good about it.
Usually we only talk about 3 reprints in here, but we're actually going to talk about 4 because we're talking about every reprint that's over $10. This totals up to $52 total. Whip of Erebos is the next one at $15. I mean, this is a graveyard deck. If you want something, you can get it out for a little bit of a discount, provided that it gets exiled later.
Plus, it's 2 types, which is pretty nice. It's an artifact and an enchantment. We also have Titania, Nature's Force, another $14 added to this list. Pretty happy about it. Again, maybe this is one you could cut, depending on what specific avenue you go down, but also $14. And Reanimate, $10. Just banger after banger. I mean, you're not cutting this one out of the deck most likely unless you already have a Reanimate, because this is a very strong Magic card. Surprised to see Reanimate in precons, but they've kind of determined this is a precon level card, at least in certain scenarios. And geez, so we got $13, $15, $14, and $10, total of $52. Again, the Precon's 40.
I mean, I'm so happy to see this. And we're only talking about cards that are $10 or more. There's a bunch of $5 and $6 cards kind of lying around too, like Ishkana, Beezy's favorites, and a couple others. So go check out that full list. But moving on to the best new cards, and there are a few in here that are a lot of fun. The first one being Into the Pit, 2 and a black for enchantment. You can look at the top card of your library at any time, and you can cast spells from the top of your library by sacking a non-land permanent in addition to paying their other costs. I love this. I mean, you can make so many disposable permanents, whether that be, your tap power stones, or, your just 0/1 creature tokens that come in. That I feel like this is not just a home for this card. Like, this deck is not just a home for this card, but there are so many other decks that will want this card too.
It looks like a black version of a future sight, where as long as you've got the fodder to go, it's not a citadel, you have to pay the mana for it, but as long as you got the fodder, you can just keep casting it whenever you cast a spell from the top of your library. You do basically, that's the equivalent of drawing a card. The only note is lands are bricks. You cannot play lands from the top. So that might hurt this card a little bit, but we'll see. Next up, Polluted Cistern / Dim Oubliette. This is a room. 1 and a black for Polluted Cistern. Whenever one or more cards are put into your graveyard from your library, each opponent loses 1 life for each card type among those cards. So if I mill an enchantment artifact, a Whip of Erebos, each opponent loses 2 life. And then 4 and a black for Dim Oubliette. Whenever you unlock this door, you mill 3 cards, then return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is not too shabby. It does not target, so even if you are graveyard hated in response, you still get to mill 3 and then get your best thing back. I do like that it fuels you a little bit. This is just kind of like a rock solid. Neither of these are busted, but it seems like a nice package.
I think so too, especially the Polluted Cistern half of this, because that comes down really, really cheap to unlock that part of the door. And also, if you can bounce stuff from your hand from like battlefield to graveyard and keep kind of like sacking it, if you can get that going, that can put a lot of damage on your opponents.
Yeah, just keep in mind with Polluted Cistern, if you mill 50 cards, you're only going to make them lose, 6 or 7 life, because that's the number of types that could be in those 50 cards. What you really want to do with Polluted Cistern is probably just mill 1 over and over, try to hit the double types, or mill 2 over and over to get the maximum amount of damage out of it. Next up, we have Deluge of Doom. 2 and a black sorcery. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is a number of card types among cards in your graveyard. I sure do love Delirium. I sure do love putting cards in my graveyard. Man, it sounds like we're super biased putting this as the #1 deck, but these cards to me stand out as possible staples of archetypes versus like, hey, do you want a 5-mana bounce? This is the 7th version of that we have. I don't know. So I'm happy about it. I think this is a cool one. Not busted again, but if you're like a super self-mill deck, maybe you play this instead of Toxic Deluge.
I mean, I'm a sucker for a good board wipe that synergizes with a deck. We saw that in like Swarmyard Massacre, and we're seeing it again. I'm so happy that these archetypes are getting some sort of removal for their decks that actually synergize more than just like, a blanket board wipe.
So let's move on to the budget adds. Now, one thing I noticed a little bit when looking at this deck is that Winter does mill you, but this is classic Precon, honestly. They always have a little bit of trouble milling and putting things in the graveyard when the deck wants to do that thing. This deck is better than most, but we're going to take a look at it. We're going to add a few things. The first thing I want to add, though, is Traverse the Ovenwald, because it's Delirium payoff. I was kind of surprised it wasn't in here, but it's no big deal. This card's like a couple bucks.
Satyr Wayfinder is also a great one because it comes down early. It's a creature that can go to the graveyard eventually if you need to sack it, and also mills you. I mean, that does a little bit of everything we want it to.
This card can put a land in your hand and get Delirium by itself, which is invaluable in this deck because it lets you go turn 2 Satyr Wayfinder, get most of Delirium, so that when you play Winter on turn 3 or 4, now you're going to get something back right away. And Winter doesn't care about the mana value or anything, so you can really cheat some stuff out. Just got to make sure you have appropriate mill, like with Aftermath Analyst. It mills you 3, that's great, fuels your game plan, and then in the super late game, you can get a bunch of lands back if that's relevant.
What an amazing card. Just overall, I love Aftermath Analyst. If you're new here, we talk about this card a lot, I'd say, but it's such a good card. The creature, the getting lands back, the mill, does a little bit of everything. Also, Invasion of Zendikar. This will help you find 2 basics out of your library and will also flip into a creature, but it counts from your card types because it's a battle, and there weren't any of those being put into this deck to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think they can put double face cards in Precons, so battles, great place to start for adding things. It lets you get a little kooky with it, because if you've got a bunch of sorceries, maybe you want to diversify your Sky Shroud Claim or your Explosive Vegetation with a battle because there's other cards in your deck that care about different card types. Also, Blossoming Tortoise, my God, this card has been an absolute house every single time I see it, and it's just the card, I just keep forgetting to put it in decks. I need to get it into my decks, but I always forget. But it's so silly. And obviously when you're fueling Delirium too.
I mean, I really need this in a bunch of my decks too. Every single time I see it, it is always very impactful.
And now we'll go on to some of our non-budget ad recommendations. This is where we're going to get huge, because as you loosen the chains of your budget, now you can play some of the biggest, baddest cards that Winter can reanimate ASAP. We're talking like Razaketh the Foul-Blooded. We want cards that, when I reanimate them on the end step, will still do something most of the time. So like, I don't really want to get like a Craterhoof Behemoth back with Winter because we're in my end step. But I do want to get Razaketh because now I can sacrifice any other dummies I have to go find the best cards in my deck.
I mean, I feel like if you have like 3 creatures out, you sack 3 creatures to Razzie, you lose your 6 life, and you tutor 3 times, you're basically winning right there. So this is so impactful, plus 8/8 Flampler. The next one is Portal to Phyrexia. This sways the game every single time I see it played. Everyone has to stack a ton of stuff, and then you get the best things. Like, this is such a good card overall, but I never want to be paying for that mana cost.
Yeah, and we're also trying to reanimate things that we don't really care about, whether or not they have a finality counter on it. That is a downside, but like we said, Razaketh, the game's over. I'm sorry, I tutored 3 times, you're dead. Or Portal to Phyrexia, sacrifice 9 creatures, across your opponents, and then if you don't kill it, I'm going to win the game. But once you kill it, I just don't care. It just doesn't matter. We can also do this with the Great Henge, whether you're playing it early or reanimating it or even just exiling it because it is an artifact to fuel some Delirium stuff. I think Great Henge does quite a bit. We also have Liliana Dreadhorde General, a Planeswalker, perfect for diversifying our types, but this static is perfect for the deck. You probably have a few sack outlets running around, and when you plus and you minus, you're just getting value.
I mean, it's a graveyard deck. Liliana has to be in here somewhere, whether it's Professor Onyx or Liliana Dreadhorde General.
Yeah, and like, who cares if my Planeswalker has a finality counter on it? I have never cared less about that line of text.
That's fine. It's going to die eventually, but I'll be winning by then. And next one is Shieldred. This is the flip Shieldred, but everyone will sacrifice something, which will get you a little bit of value. And then on the back, oh my god, if you can get it all the way to the back, that's amazing.
Yeah, if you can flip Shieldred, you can definitely win the game. Kind of just a value piece. We talked about the other Shieldred, so let's bring in the newest Shieldred too. As for cuts, Delirium is a tough thing to enable sometimes, so there's just like some weird cards in here. We're going to cut Whisper Silk Cloak. You're supposed to put it on Winter, I guess, to protect him, but I don't think I've ever really needed Whisper Silk Cloak too much. I mean, go find a Greaves if you want that thing. Just cut Whisper Silk.
Yeah, I don't really think I need it too much because even though attacking means you can mill, if you put in other ways to self-mill, I can still get Winter's Trigger at the end step, and I don't really have to attack with him. The next one is Harmonize. We want card draw, but this is just not a good rate. 4 mana for 3 cards, even if it is counting towards the sorcery count.
Yeah, I think if it's a sorcery, I'd rather just put something cheap in the deck, like Traverse, to enable that early and get it in the first few turns so that I can have a Winter activation very early, like on turn 3 or 4. So I don't know. Harmonize just feels a little clunky. Obnix was reignited. It's just not a commander card. None of the rates of this are even close to good. If you play this, you're going to feel bad and you're going to miss out on tempo. You're going to plus it and it'll die, or you're going to minus it and it'll die. None of that's great for 5 mana.
I don't really care about it diversifying my types in the deck anyways, at least for this kind of rate, because there are so many better Planeswalkers or battles or something else to throw in that you can really help get those Delirium types in. There's also Moldgraph Millipede. I really just... It's the Ajani's Pride Mate type deal, right? It's like, I don't want to put all of my counters onto one creature because that's not my win con right there. This is like a 1v1 card, not a commander card.
Like, even in the most magical Christmas land, I have a giant vanilla creature. It's just like not what I'm here for. Suspicious Bookcase. It is an artifact and a creature. That has to be the only reason this is in here. I guess you can make Winter unblockable. I don't imagine I'm going to be attacking with Winter all that often. I really don't care. I'm going to use the rest of my deck, fuel the Delirium thing, then get a bunch of stuff for free and win. Winter, you can just hang back, buddy. We're good. So I don't need Suspicious Bookcase. I think overall, though, pretty solid batch of precons.
I think so too. I'm just so excited for all of these. The 4th one being Endless Punishment, 3rd one being Miracle Worker, the 2nd one being Jump Scare, and the 1st one being Death Toll.
If you want to watch more Nitpicking Nerds, there's a choice. If you're watching this the day of, then you've got YouTube's personal recommendation for you. If not, Duskmourn Top 10 is here. That's this video, and you should definitely watch it.